We'll be done with him by 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
And then you and Nancy will come in. So.
Oh, okay. And then socials will be home.
Yeah. Yes, it will come. Well, so that is Ransford K. Boachi, and like he indicated, we are ushering in the former Finance Minister, Honorable Seth Tekpe. We have already indicated to you on our various platforms, and I indicated to you earlier in my introduction that he was going to join us for an interaction on a range of issues, trending issues, what he's been doing, and he's been commenting on the economy a lot. He's also famous for being the only person in 2017 who said that the free senior high school was unsustainable, and he was nearly buried alive. Well, Honorable, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Your listeners and I believe some viewers.
Yes.
You're online.
Yes, we are on Facebook Live.
Facebook Live. I'm happy to join you for the first time. On Facebook.
Yes. Especially since this happened. This is the first time we have any in the studio. In fact.
Yes, indeed, there is. Yeah, this is the first time.
Yeah, I think since you left power, have you been here?
Yeah.
You were here once. Okay.
Not once.
Oh, a couple of times.
A couple of times.
Yeah.
One was a long one with you. And then there was a weekend one. If
Okay.
you remember, preceding the...
Yes. On Alaji and Alaji. Yes.
I love Radio Gold!
Yes.
It's always a
90.5.
privilege,
And always a privilege to have you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? Well, I do some consulting. Registered with, various institutions. I also
love Radio Gold!
do teaching, which is one of my passions.
Okay.
I've always taught.
So this is not the first time you are lecturing?
No, actually, this is my second stint with the University of Ghana.
Oh, okay.
I used to teach FE tax many years back in the 90s before I left the country.
Oh, all right.
Yes. And then I've taught in various places from, many years back. ICA Evening School, I've taught in Laboni Secondary School. Those days was to make ends meet. but I'm a product of Kivas.
Okay.
And so I just, love teaching, including when I was back then, even in Kivas, we used to organize extra classes for secondary school in our area just to help, the students. So teaching is something which I do. And in fact, I was teaching in the IMF Institute and other places when I was, at the front, and did some adjuncts in Harvard University, Duke,
okay,
and other places. Yeah, so I've always taught. Currently, I'm teaching, as you said, public policy.
This is the first time I'm hearing that you have such a track record in actually teaching. I thought this was your first time.
No, not really.
Oh, experienced.
Yeah, not really. I teach part-time adjunct. Adjunct means and that's what I do in Legon. You partner, regular lectures. So I've just got my letters. So you go through the syllabus with your partner lecturer, and then you pick a number of, topics, out of the syllabus, and you handle those. And normally I handle public financial management and public policy. Okay. And I do teach some tax also.
Okay.
Yes.
So public financial management, public
financial management, that's public finance generally.
Okay.
Yes. And that includes tax expenditure.
Okay.
Things like how do you manage national debt. And then we delve into the Constitution a bit also. Chapter 13 of the Constitution is exclusively about public finance. Most people don't know about it.
Okay.
So there's a lot that is in the consolidated fund, public accounts, state-owned enterprises. They are all there in the Constitution. Yeah.
And so far, how has it been like? Because say the last, you were doing it at the board before you were appointed. You were doing some form of lecturing and teaching with IMF before you were appointed Deputy Finance Minister.
Yes. Oh. I was teaching before I left the country. I was even when I was doing the value-added tax, I was teaching.
Oh, okay.
Yes, as national coordinator, I wasn't teaching. And then when I left the country, I continued teaching in Strayer University. I did adjunct. One of the ones I remember very vividly, which is I used to go back to teach in Harvard University after summer programs, after I left there, and then started my consulting actually with Harvard Institute for International Development. That's how it all started. And the one I remember very well was being at the fund and being invited by Professor Butchie, who was then in Harvard, to come and make some presentations in his class. Dr. Butchie, my former boss.
Yes. and so far, how has it been like, your experience at the University of Ghana?
Well, as I said, I've taught there before. It was, back then, it was a large class, FE class. This one's a master's level, but I do teach some level 3 and 4.
Okay.
Students. We do joint workshops and seminars. I do. As I said, it's something which I like doing, and I like the interaction with students.
With students.
Yeah, because it keeps your mind. They ask deep questions. Some do very deep research, and I like them to do research. So.
And during your interactions, do people raise questions about your time as finance minister?
Yes, it comes up a lot.
And if
there was one lecture that fell, I believe, just after, Ken, Honorable Ferrer, well, I call him Ken, old friendship. Honorable Ferrer had presented his budget, so we did a follow-up lecture on the budget process.
Okay.
How it starts all the way from issuing of the budget guidelines as early as February, March, to go into the background, what culminates in the day, and then also after, the role of Parliament, the committees, what they do and everything. Yeah, and I believe that they appreciated it. A lot of lecturers attended that.
And I saw that you've been writing on the economy for some time now.
My writing is on you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was encouraged to do writing by the late Professor Mills.
Okay. Oh, so you started writing way back then?
Yeah, I was writing. If you go back, the articles which I wrote when I was VAT coordinator after Harvard, and I said yes, so I've been writing quite a bit.
I have forgotten some of the titles you've used recently, but some of them suggest that you are worried about the direction the current economic managers are taking. Am I correct? Are you worried?
Well, I try in my writings to be objective because as much as possible, because also when I write, I'm cognizant of the fact that my students, read and others also read. So when I'm writing, I try to be as technical as possible. But that's also, but it's also, I'm a political figure now, and therefore some of them is setting the record, straight. To borrow from my good friend, colleague, Deputy Minister, Fifi Kuti. But there are policy issues. So, for example, as the President was addressing yesterday, one key issue is, did we do anything, about the financial sector?
Yeah.
And yes, I wrote 3-part article. But when I do that, it's not just about what we did with ESLA, the money that came in. And the first restructuring which we did, people don't know because of, the impression that the Mahama administration never did anything. But we did a first restructuring with 13 banks, and it didn't lead to, any closures, any, dismissals of staff or anything, because you are balancing. You are balancing a number of factors when you are doing public policy, as we are seeing now. But then, in my conclusion, then I go to the global financial crisis. I go back to history. We had a non-performing assets recovery trust, which the president mentioned, former president, President Mahama is the title, mentioned, yesterday. And I was working in the ministry then. I believe it was early under Dr. Butchie, continued, later for a long time, the resolution. And so that's what we call a bad bank for people. The non-performing assets recovery trust means the non-performing loans which are weighing on the banks. You take them off, and then you give it to a special entity to do the recoveries and to manage.
So
and then
far back in the 1980s, you had handled this kind of situation.
No, I wasn't involved. I was I was doing tax.
Okay.
I was working with my immediate boss was Mr.
You were in the
Mr.
background.
Tuahoy.
You were in the background
I was
and observe how
too
he was
young to be. But I had a privilege because I worked very closely to Mr. Tuahoy, to whom I give credit all the time. I know, he says I was just doing his working, but I always give him a lot of credit for and my immediate civilian boss then, Mr. Lavisian, who later became my advisor, who was set up, very well known, in Africa. So because we were a very small group on the Structural Adjustment Program Secretariat and also on the National Revenue Secretariat, you had the privilege of attending, being in the background, taking notes, preparing, for the meetings and whatever. I took we were encouraged to take a very deep and keen interest, particularly by the coordinator of all those programs, the late, Mrs. Daishap or Ms. Gabiano. So yes, I had the privilege of having insight into public policy, and that actually dictated my choice, in doing public administration for my master's. Yeah, but later I did an MBA as well.
Okay, so your whole time as finance minister, from deputy finance minister to finance minister, majority of the things you did were informed by the experiences you had at the time working with all those people, and also the follow-ups at the fund, among other organizations.
The exposure helped. Yes, you go back into history. What did we do? So, so talking about what I wrote, the 3-part article is online, and people can. So then I go back. What did the advanced countries do in those circumstances? So, for example, in the U.S., when the crisis began, which began with households and the banks having been weighed heavily, by the debts, and all those situations, they allowed Lehman Brothers, which was a bank, to fail.
Okay.
The 10th anniversary was written about a lot. And the ramifications for the U.S. economy, other banks, and U.S. banks are linked to the group, to Europe and to everywhere, and made them stop. So they didn't allow any more banks to fail.
Okay.
So when we talk about quantitative easing, that's where it came from. It meant like what we did with impact. You ring fence, the bad debt which is weighing on them, which are normally in the form of, if you follow the Dr. Indum case, he's talking about, hey, I'm holding government paper, it's money, because I gave a loan to a contractor, and the security for it are his documents that, when he's paid.
Okay.
He'll bring the money to the bank. In fact, there was a case in court which the government lost, so we stopped the practice, right? But we had understanding. But we used to write on the warrant, for example, contractor A, B, stroke bank, so and so.
Okay.
And so the contractor cannot go and, cash, the check because it's a joint check with the bank.
Okay.
And so when we did, the VRA debt, the first restructuring, we ring-fenced all of VRA's debt, the energy sector debt, and the contractors that were behind it. We had an informal agreement, and then we had the Institute of Bankers. The 30 banks were led by their presidents, the Institute of Bankers, and we did a tripartite. So the first ESLA flows of 250 was used as cash injection, because the problem was the banks were not being paid, so they needed cash. So we gave them the cash injection. And then we took 2.2 billion of energy sector debt, and we formed a committee. And that's why I always talk about ESLA, because it showed a path that the flows from ESLA were strong. And for the energy sector levy, could resolve the entire energy sector levy within 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
So we did the first 2.2 billion restructuring of debt, and then we said we'll use ESLA to pay. But then we ring-fenced the money that VRA, was using previously, lowered the interest rate. That's what you call the haircut, and then started to prepare that for the waterfall. So this whole talk about the energy sector we didn't prepare. That's why it's called the Energy, Sector Levies Act.
Okay, so let's take the issues apart. First, about the banking sector, which is the issue now. where the financial sector, because if I said the banking, there's a focus on the banks, but it started with the banks. It's gone to financial institutions like the investment institutions. And then we've gone to savings and loans now.
I said if you read the media review,
Yes,
it's not ending there. The media review states that the capitalization for insurance companies and others are also going to be reviewed. So yes, you're right. It's about the whole financial, bank and non-bank financial sector, as we call it.
But
yes.
but the Bank of Ghana says is done with the financial sector cleanup.
Well, to the extent that the Bank of Ghana is still in charge of the financial sector, yes and no. Maybe the program with the core banking sector, but it never ends, because the point is, you've taken close to, let me use officially what has been released now, in the media review is about 11 billion, right, of government money. You've taken ESLA, which is a tax money, and the ESLA bond, if you remember.
Yes.
So when somebody says we didn't do anything, remember ESLA bond. We issued the ESLA bond. The current government issued the ESLA bond. If we didn't do anything, would the flows be available for you to do the bond? Right? So I think it can be. But the point I'm making is, for as long as you have these public funds going in, right, to resolve the crisis, the difference we had, as President Mahama pointed out, is we chose, to give the money to the banks, right, and then do the resolution of the crisis. The restructuring is another thing. The malfeasance and other things, they are there, which can be handled, legally. But as with the other advanced countries, you need to protect depositors, because your action affects depositors, it affects clients, it affects related businesses and whatever. So, you have to be pragmatic in these things. But the context in which I say it's not done is 7 or 8 years after the global financial crisis. Some of the securities, remember I spoke about, some of the securities that were used to back the restructuring, which I believe is being done, or like the VRA, whatever, down the road, it yielded very good profits for the Federal Reserve in the US and the UK Treasury. Sorry, UK Bank of England, and they paid that money back to government to recover some of the, debt. So the immediate resolution may be over, but I'll feel really worried if I don't think the governor meant it in a terminal. Now when I use government, I'm using it to represent the whole structure. Like it's terminated, because there is continued work to be done. There's work to be done with the receivers. There's work to be done. The monies that are collected, you pay depositors, and all that. It may never be enough, right? And so taxpayers will take a hit.
Well,
but some of it can also be recovered. Yes, that's happening in Europe and America.
Okay. If you just join us, you are watching Honorable Seth Tekpe on Facebook, Radio Gold 905 FM. We are also live on our radio streaming apps. Now, the issue with what has been done, the financial sector cleanup, a lot of experts have questioned the approach, how they have done it. And I remember recently on our Tekpe Apede also raised some issues about some of the alternatives that could have been used.
Yes, in my third article, I pointed, for example, and Dr. Indum, again, I keep mentioning, because he's a financial expert anyway, so I gave a couple of examples. We could tear the banks, right? In fact, the structure we have now is tearing the banks, because you have the investor banks, right? Then you have the savings and loans. Then you have rural banks, and then microfinance, and then credit companies. This is the structure. So our banking structure is tiered. There's nothing wrong with having within universal banks category 1, 2, and 3. They all don't have to have 400 million. Right. Because banking is such that your capitalization determines the loans that you give. So if your capitalization is 100 and somebody has 400, million, it means the person with 400 million capitalization can give 4 times more loans than you. And that's a regulation. That's the Bank of Ghana regulation. So we could tear the banks, right? Because coughing up some of these big sums of money. I've seen some of the insurance from 50 million to, so maybe we can later on use the right figure so that we know what
okay.
to be factual, in these matters. So that's one solution. The other solution is a bad bank.
A sort of a reclassification.
Yeah, what you said, Tekpe, and that first one is you could make it a bit easier by saying within the top echelon you can have category 1, 2, and 3 banks. Some because they are above savings and loan.
Okay.
But they may not be up to 400.
Okay.
Because remember the first recapitalization which we started was to be 230 million, which was then increased to 400 million. So the tiering, those who argue for tiering the banks can say, okay, within 200 and 400 million, you can have category 1, minimum 200, category 2, 300, category 4, 400.
Okay.
And they can operate well. And it's far above the 15 or so million, which you need for savings and loan.
Okay.
And then you come to the savings and loan, so between them and, the 200 or now 400, 15 million to, it's huge. So they are big savings and loan. I don't have the figures. But we know Popular names, Bond and others who presumably are doing, well. They can be in a higher tier.
Okay.
So that, and the Bank of Ghana did something quite similar.
Okay.
Remember the initial step taken again, grouping them, that is GN Bank,
Yes.
was to move them from
Universal
Bank to
a
savings and loan.
Yeah.
And considering that it's 15 to 18 million, I wonder, how it couldn't have been sustained, given even some of the figures that we're talking about.
Okay.
Right. So I'm saying that is an example. First example. Second one is what I started already. You could create a bad bank, because most of the problem starts with non-performing loans. Okay. There's a diversion of funds, which has to be dealt with. The U.S. dealt with it with a law called the Glass-Steagall, I hope I get the names right, law, which made it strict that banking is banking, and you can't use bank funds to go and do affiliate business.
Okay.
To protect depositors' funds.
Okay.
So we could strengthen the Banking Act, for example, to do that. You could also, instead of waiting every 5 years, because this is the second recapitalization, major recapitalization we are doing, I would say maybe even a third, if you consider that it was to be 230 and then to 400.
Yeah.
You may want to say, okay, in 5 years, we are now at 400. We envisage that given inflation and everything, your capitalization would have to be 600. So maybe in 5 years, you use some of their profit to put aside 50 million until you reach cumulatively. So these are some of alternative solutions, and I believe that in such matters of enormous, and that is a consideration for us because such decisions have significant implications, as we are saying, as we are seeing now. It has implications for workers who are likely to lose their job if you don't handle it well. It has implications for their immediate families, and in Africa and beyond. Maybe I'm looking after a nephew, not just my son, or my daughter, nephews and nieces, even strangers. We like to help. Extended family. Okay. You have depositors. Even if their funds are locked for 3 months, it may stop a business from running. It may be harassed from its creditors and others before it could access. Some may never recover because I don't know if we can get enough money to cover, all of it.
Okay.
Confidence in the banking system, which is what borders on security that the president was talking about. It means that people mistrust the bank. And so it creates more problems for the banks because the first thing they do, they come and withdraw their money. Because banks have been closed, so they come in. And if it gets so bad, that's what you call a run on the bank.
Okay.
So you have a lot of, and it happened, these things happen even in advanced countries. In fact, the depression of the 1930s was one of the key reasons in the U.S. was a run on banks, particularly in the New York area. So when the banks, when I come and take my deposit, right, and I can't recover loans quickly, then banks operate on taking a deposit and using multiples of it to give loans. So when they come and take, let's say the 10 million, which I used to give 15 million, some will say even 10%, 100 million loan. It means that when somebody comes to take his, all those with whom I give the loan and the ramifications. So when you take all this effect, economic activity, because they are the ones that oil the economy, whether it's a roadside, vendor, microfinance who comes to take the money, or a big guy, when you have confidence in the shaking, then the banking system begins to suffer, and sometimes it takes a while, to recover.
And the approach that they have, have used.
Yeah.
What are they risking? What risk are they exposing the economy to?
I think we are seeing some of the risks, and the risk is some of what I'm talking about. The risk,
the job losses, the
confidence issue. That's the risk of what we call the big bang approach.
Okay.
What is being done as a big bang approach, as opposed to the gradualist approach, which we thought. And we had a second term sheet actually after the first one, for 600 million, US dollars. And that was denominated in dollars, not in cedis, even though the 2.2 billion cedis had a foreign component also. And that was going to target foreign suppliers. And that's where I was saying VRA's forest flows were going to be relevant, because they were using part of that to service the debt already. So you ring fence that, but then you substitute it with the ESLA, and the flows again, like the banks, the suppliers were, confident enough that the flows will come. But they don't come directly, they come with their banks. So if we tell the banks that, hey, ESLA is going to, in 5 years, repay that, if there are, say, 5 suppliers, let me just put it suppliers, say IPPs, we bring the 5, we compute the total liability between them and VRA, remove cross debts and other things. I hope I'm not being too technical. Okay. So you ring fence and you say, we need 500 million to pay, what VRA is owing, to suppliers who supply them with. It was then gas for their thermal plants mainly. Remember, our Kosovo dam was going down. Okay. It wasn't supplying enough power. We had a breach of supply of gas from Nigeria, which was creating, and then crude oil prices were above 100. So it was very difficult to adjust, tariffs, because a temporary thing which, could fall. Now, back to the point, you ring fence the debt. The suppliers bring their banks, and you say, we want you to convert, we want to refinance the loan you gave to the suppliers, but this time backed by ESLA for 3 to 5 years. Okay, that was our approach.
Okay.
And they accepted. They were led by Afrism. So we're going to do another 600 million backed by ESLA, which then would have settled the IPP debt, which incidentally we are talking about in a media review.
Okay.
Right. And we handed over that term sheet. So there's no denial.
Okay.
Right.
So you had already seen the problem.
So that's a
with the
gradualist,
banking sector.
exactly. Yeah.
You had started some work on it. You realized that a majority of the debt in the sector was coming from government, were to government institutions, and you're trying to pay off those debts gradually.
Yeah, because you had a private non-performing loans, and you have the public non-performing loans. And we wanted to inject funds into the banks and to suppliers and others quickly, because we had a handle on the public, right? And then and once you've settled the banks, so for example, if a bank non-performing loan is 100 and 40 is from the public sector, and remember, ESLA had 2 elements, key elements: road levy, enhanced road levy, which was to settle contractors.
Yes.
Right, and then we had
those have
the
been
energy.
Increased.
Yeah, that's what has been. Yeah, those have been increased. Those are nuisance taxes that have been increased, right? Right. So we had those 2 elements. So it was meant, So when it comes to contractors,
so those were targeted elements of.
It was targeted. In fact, the memorandum to the act, and you may want to go to parliamentary library and read it. Quantified.
Okay.
Yes, it's quantified, and that's how we used to fix the levies. And then we, of course, brought in the lighting heavy levy, the SHEP levy, which was used for rural development. But the two key elements, yes, and those two alone bring in about 2.3 to 2.5, billion.
Okay.
Annually. The whole ESLA is bringing about 3.2 billion annually, and to date it has brought in about 10 billion. So part of the funds that are being used for the solutions were based on the programs that we put in place. Right. So our approach, coming to approaches, the big bang, which is being done now, okay, raise everything, even collapse some, and bold attempts look for 20 billion, 30 billion and try and resolve it, which, by the way, could have gone to the same banks.
Okay.
Right. Close them, like we were doing, following the impact. Or the structural gradualist approach, which, because of the risks to the economy, which you pointed out, we thought was, and I think we've been vindicated that it's a better option.
And you also saw the issues of corporate governance, the excessive risk taking, and some of those issues.
The audit was done in IRA.
Okay.
Yeah. And it forms the basis for some of what I'm talking about. There may have been two audits, but the first one was done.
So how
the
were you
quality
going to deal with those issues, like lending to companies that were affiliated to the banks, among others?
Yeah, Bank of Ghana, was to tighten. Remember, we did the Banking Act. We did some tightening and whatever. So, as a response to the very first issues that were coming up.
Okay.
Another thing which we put in place was the insurance, the depositors insurance, which Ghana didn't have, but many countries have. So which says that banks should contribute to an insurance fund.
Okay.
So that when something happens like it is happening now, right, like it is happening now, small depositors will benefit, in particular will benefit.
Okay. Because
there is, so what you do in the US is that when there's a banking crisis, they have what they call FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance, which is for depositors. Okay. And the banks pay the premium, government contributes to it, right? And so when something happens to a single bank or to a group of banks, then you fall on it. But it pays only a minimum amount. Okay. So it can say, when something happens, we have insured up to, say, 10,000 or 15,000. For many people, microfinance, savings and loan, that's all they have in the bank. So they can be catered for. And even a guy who has 100 million, well, it may not be good respite, but at least 10,000 or something. So and they know the risk. So we put in that law as well. So we're doing those. And then if somebody is doing, as I mentioned earlier, if somebody is using depositors' funds to do other things, tighten the law, right, and then set up regulations. It may be that the regulation is not clear, right? If it's clear, then that is where, infringements come in, and then the law will have to take its course, which is different from
what is
the non-performing loan and other, yes. The two things are inseparable. You can't separate them, because if the person is using depositors' funds to go and do those things, obviously, Bank of Ghana is right to clamp down on that. But again, back to approach. That's where our differences lie. Not the issues.
Well, so you're watching and listening to Honorable Seth Tekpe now. Okay, so I think Boachi is right when he said that the ESLA was not only put together for energy sector deaths, there was also the deaths of the contractors in the road sector also factored in. So it was supposed to do a lot.
Yes. And remember, we were talking about public. But remember, if I settle VRA, as we did, the beneficiaries are private banks, and the beneficiaries are independent power producers, private. The beneficiaries are suppliers and others, because VRA does mostly, with suppliers. Of course, there's a link with Gridco, electricity company, and the rest, yes. But ESLA was to bring that immediate respite, and then it was linked to the waterfall, as I was talking about.
And now, so I have always asked you this
question. Thank you for that introduction.
I have always asked you this question. Why does it look like under this administration, ESLA is failing to do exactly what it's supposed to do?
Well, because for 1.5 years, there was virtually nothing done. The term sheet was not effected. And they chose the path of setting up the ESLA PLC. We considered the ESLA PLC. But there was too much being put on government balance sheet.
Okay.
And once you establish a quasi-fiscal institution, then the IMF, the World Bank, and others who look at the debt sustainability, you've underwritten. The same thing with GATT.
Okay.
Right? So we said, look, what we can do for you is that 13 bankers, we are going to create an escrow account and pay the extra money into it. And the money is flowing as taxes. So like we did with airport tax and Terminal 3. We will domicile the money in Bank of Ghana. There will be a standing order to go into your escrow account and you manage it. So that's the structure, which...
That you left.
Yes.
And you were
following. And so if it had been continued, because the extra funds were still flowing. Remember, they couldn't have done 7 years, 10. And remember, I was saying that ESLA is bringing in 3 billion, right? We were going to do it for 3 to 5 years, which is if you take 3 years, 15 billion was envisaged.
Okay.
Right. If you take 5 years, then it's 3 times 5. That's 15. 9 and then 15. Right. Was envisaged. So if you do an ESLA bond backed by ESLA, flows, and now you have even increased it, and it's coming in at 3 billion, then for 10 years, 30 billion. You could use it to resolve the banking sector crisis. This is the other place where I come from, and I say that if you look at the liability that is being said, even His Excellency 2 days ago was talking 13 billion, Ghana cedis, the highest number I've heard quoted, and we don't have, it's about 20, billion. So you can therefore do a loan. If you are using ESLA for that purpose, only exclusively, you would have people who, like we had, who have confidence and if you want to do a bond, for not 30 billion because it's, but maybe 20 billion or whatever, and use it to resolve without necessarily going for loans again.
Yeah. That is an interesting...
So I think, yes, so the delay, affected the issues. We didn't live in we had a problem we acknowledged. Of course, it was simplified, during the campaign.
Okay.
You see, what I mean by the issues were oversimplified during the campaign, oversimplified, not just simplified, was that one, you had a global financial crisis.
Okay.
And then you had the BRIC meltdown, the middle income country.
No, I know you're going to talk about the economic issues that were raised during the campaign and the fact that there was a feeling that we we're managing the economy well. But I just want one last question on the ESLA issue. So basically, what you're saying is 2 things. One, they abandoned the plan which you had in place and was following.
Yeah, so for example, the loan we did for VI was refinanced.
Okay. Then the second one is the fact that even if they decide to go the route they have taken, ESLA should be enough to cater for
I've always maintained. From the flows.
Okay.
And I'm quoting from the ESLA report. Yes, I'm quoting figures from the ESLA, report. Maybe when we take a break, I'll look for.
Okay, so
for it, and, yes.
Those are very interesting things that the Honorable Minister is saying. But in case you are listening and watching us and you like to ask him some questions, or there are some issues you like to raise, please, especially if you're on the, you can send a WhatsApp to 0233 995 905, or you can use the comment section of our Facebook live broadcast and make your comments or ask the questions that you want to ask. And of course, now let you're trying to raise the ESLA issue, but whilst you try to do that, you're also going to talk about.
Yes, so I was saying that. You see, part of the problem now is there were issues happening, not just to the Ghanaian economy, but to sub-Saharan Africa in particular, because of our dependence on commodities. So quickly, there was a global financial crisis. And what a global financial crisis does is that when the advanced countries have a shock and they do their version of austerity and try to correct things, right, what we call austerity, demand falls. And when domestic demand falls, it means demand, for example, demand for chocolate falls.
Okay.
That means demand for cocoa
will also
fall.
Okay.
Right? Because they are not going to buy cocoa in stock. Because they know annually it will come. And when the demand falls, simple supply and demand, it means the price will fall.
Okay.
Right. And when the price falls, we take a hit. Tax revenue, we take a hit. Forex. Now, during that period, following the global financial crisis, then the emerging economies, the strong middle-income countries, Brazil, India, China, in particular China, melted down when the crude oil prices fell.
Okay.
In 2015, 2016. You remember, we went to Parliament to revise, yes.
Yes.
And it worsened the situation. In fact, to date, there are I think Nigeria is getting out or has gone out, but Nigeria, South Africa, Angola, and many African countries went into recession. We fought the recession. We never went into recession.
Okay.
Right. When you oversimplify these problems, and that's the reason we did ESLA, which was described as a nuisance tax that will be removed, because I said, remember, VRA was buying crude at a very high price and they had to buy it because of the disruption in flow, of gas, the thermal plants and Ameri and other things, which were heavily criticized, right? And I like to see that either the solutions were ignored, because I respect people in the NPP. They're as knowledgeable as people in there. So they must know that something was really wrong. Fine, but when you come to power, right, then you have to. Of course, I'm not the one to tell them. I mean, luckily enough, they came into 3 oil fields. We had 1. Output is now almost triple what we were getting, right? Crude oil prices rebounded from the low 40s. Now it's above 60. So the revenue is about 4 times what we are earning. That's very important. If you are not meeting your revenue targets, it doesn't mean that revenue is not coming.
Okay.
Revenue is coming far in excess of what we were getting. Right? So if you simplify the problems and you come to power, husband the resources well to resolve the crisis. You don't wait for 1 year and then you continue blaming, our administration.
But the person who led that oversimplification during the campaign, like you say, is Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. He's an economist. And
a former deputy governor.
Used to work with the Bank of Ghana.
Yeah.
It was held by Mr. Osafo, who is the former finance minister, among others.
I just said that.
So
I just said that. I don't want to disrespect the MPP by saying that they lack understanding. Not at all. And many of them are your classmates.
Was that what they displayed?
Well, they said our president was not competent. Right? They call him incompetent president. His Excellency addressed that. Right. Which I say, maybe campaign, yes, it's oversimplification. We try to correct these things, but the simple solutions that were proposed, and mind you, there isn't a problem we had around that time, for which we did not have solutions. Let me give you another example.
Okay.
The first sovereign bond that was issued by Ghana was issued in 2007 by the Kufuor administration. We were paying interest only. By 2014, in my very first, it was an issue which started coming up, under my former boss, Dr. Dufo. And so we started planning. I happened to have taken the mantle. We also had needs, a lot of needs. But we created a sinking fund and started putting money aside. Otherwise, you wait for 2017, which was just, 4 years away. Right? Because if you are going to look for money, 750 million US dollars, right? Even if you give yourself 4 years, on average, you are getting close to 200 million. You need 200 million US dollars annually to be able to take it off. Otherwise, what will happen? You have to go to the markets and refinance because you are not paying the principal. And then those holding the bond will come to you with their terms for refinancing. Otherwise, you default. So we started using the sinking fund. And by the time we left, that's how the refinancing started. So some of the bonds that we issued, we used it to refinance, I believe, up to 200 million or something. Left with about 550 million US dollars. By the time we were leaving office, we used 336 million US dollars of our own sinking fund, our own oil revenue to take off that amount of the debt. The balance on that bond was about 213 or so million. We had money sitting in the sinking fund because we couldn't do the buyback again. They were not putting it back on the market. We were buying it off the markets. October 4th, 2017, that money was used to pay off the bond. I'm talking about 2017.
Okay.
No mention. Not even in the 2017 budget that we have.
They used the money from the sinking fund
which we had established
to pay off the bond.
Yes.
But it was never mentioned even in there.
No, it wasn't. But that's not the point. The point I'm making is the sinking fund mechanism we put in place continue to operate. We have continued to pay interest, and we haven't used the sinking fund to take off any debt since then. So if debt is and there is evidence from the budget, I think it's page 50. There's a graph there. This graph which shows that you can see it clearly, and since we are on Facebook, hopefully they will see
you'd have to turn it this way.
So you see this graph that since HIPIC, right, it doesn't go that far back, but if you draw the graph through HIPIC, you see that the rate at which we accumulate debt was going up. Sometimes it tapers. It tapered under Dr. Dufo because of the refinancing and things and then you can see from 2013, 2014, because of the sinking fund and others, even though the nominal value of debt is going up, which is what they mentioned here, the rate at which we were accumulating debt, you can see started going down. And that's why we were stalled at close to 70 for about 3 years. 70 to 73, right, nominal percent of GDP. Now from 2017, because the sinking fund and others are not being used to take off the debt, you can see the curve has started going up again, right? And my last point, the debt level for which we were berated,
yes,
right? And I think I mentioned this before. At the end of 2016, within 2 years, as at the end of 2018, the debt level at the end of 2018 is higher than what we left, with more oil revenue, with ESLA, and with all these resources that were left. The debt accumulation, the debt level, because it is rising, in fact, if on the new rebase, we left at 56 points, something. Today, in fact, it's close to 60.
Okay.
So one would have thought that with rebasing and with additional flows and whatever, probably it would have been down to maybe 50 or so by now. No, it's rather going up. Yeah. And so I'm saying that, yes, we left, solutions, but if they are not being followed, I don't think that the Mahama administration should be blamed at all.
But the tag of incompetence that was thrown at your administration, the president carried the tag for about 4 years. And then yourself, you were attacked. In fact, there were people within your party who even felt that you were not managing the way you were managing the economy, based on what they were saying, will lead the party into opposition. Now, more than 2.5 years down the lane, do you feel like you are necessarily vilified?
Look, I think we started by, by a bit of history, how I started my career. So I've been in policy for a very long time, both locally and one of the things for which I'm grateful is many of the measures we put in place: sinking fund, Exim Bank, infrastructure fund. Infrastructure fund is what transformed Dubai in 30 years.
Okay.
Proud to that, and even until I was in graduate school, talk was always about petrodollar. A lot of dollars moving from oil revenue, Middle East, to go to New York, to go to all those things, until they had the presence of mind to bring the dollar home to develop. So you had Dubai, China did something similar, Brazil used its oil revenue, and that's how they became middle-income countries. The other example is the Eastern European countries, like Croatia, Lithuania. Today they come here and they say they will give us loan and other things. But to join the EU, you had to put some of these mechanisms in place, and that makes you a worthwhile middle income. So many of those things were from, that exposure which I had when I did missions, as a member of the, a staff of the IMF. So I was bringing to bear,
Okay.
in a political economic context, measures which, particularly since we were having oil, which is a new resource,
Okay.
right, we needed to do certain things. And now it's been shown that some of these things. I don't think, having been around policy for a long time, and I told you even from my career, I work with politicians, Dr. Bochwe and others. I know about the vilification of politicians. Right.
So you anticipated it to a certain extent?
Well, let me put it this way, with all humility. It's not everybody who is even educated or even had the opportunity to work outside who would have worked within context of, say, the World Bank, the IMF, and others, as I did, to see some of the things, the exposure that I do. So my responsibility is to try and explain, which is what I try to do as much as possible. But the situation was tough, especially when crude oil prices fell, because when crude oil prices were even average, we attempted to after we went to Parliament to amend the PRMA so that we could bring the oil prices down from $99, which we used to prepare under the formula, to $56, I remember, per barrel. We couldn't get it. It was $40 or something. So the economy took a big hit.
Okay.
But if I am going to excuse lay NDC or even MPP for not understanding some of what I was saying, I don't think those who should have known, who were giving them the impression that things could be simplified, right? You mentioned free SHS. I still maintain that it's not fiscally sustainable, because look at what is being thrown at free SHS.
Okay.
Right? First, capping. So all the statutory funds were capped. Debt fund, DACF, which the Supreme Court just said was, luckily that's in the Constitution, so just nullified. IGFs and whatever. They were capped, thrown into free SHS. It means free SHS is not free. It has a cost. It has a cost to rural development, and the assemblies were suffering. It has a cost to, the providers not being paid because the NHIL was capped, and that's the reason input VAT has been blocked to bring in more revenue, to pay them. So it has a cost. Secondly, even PIAC raised the issue that even within the education sector, they were not conforming to the PRMA by using 70% of the ABFA to go into even education infrastructure. Okay. It was going to recurrent expenditure. And I'm looking at the numbers, but speculation is that almost 80% of ABFA is going into free SHS, so it's not without cost. Okay. Infrastructure is suffering. Remember the attempts to say that Heritage Fund was bringing low revenues, let's use it to invest into education, just an alias for throwing everything. So if you look at all of these, which is going into free SHS, right, I believe that the minister himself fell short when he said, for those whose sons are in Achimota and the rest, and they can pay, right? I'm not quoting him, I'm just paraphrasing. Yeah. They should be allowed to pay, and he was roasted. Yes. Right? He's the one looking at the numbers. And so he's the one telling us that, in essence, it's not sustainable. The path is not sustainable. And let me give you another example. If you look at the provision for arrears, the government just went for supplementary budget.
Yes.
The government said it needed money to pay energy sector debt. I just showed that it shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
Schools are reopening September. The third year is coming in September. Where apart from saying we introduced free SHS and it's working, where in the supplementary budget were we giving numbers? Where in the supplementary budget were we? Because remember, September is in 2019 fiscal year. And so the first semester is going to be 2019 fiscal year. The 2020 budget is going to deal with second semester going. So where in the budget have we been giving any analysis at all about what it will take to take on the additional, where's the infrastructure expansion? Because this is the first time all three streams are going to be. So you're going to have, all 3 years going. Right. Minority tried to get information. We didn't. Right. And nobody can convince me that and I call it the small amount, 858 million. And remember, it was not adjusted.
Yeah.
The supplementary budget, that's another question we are going to ask, because they did a supplementary budget and said there were energy sector arrears for which they needed more money. If there were arrears, why were the arrears in the budget not adjusted? It was left, the same. How come the adjustment was made amortization? Have you borrowed already? The amortization means that you are paying debt, right? You see, but it wasn't adjusted. And if it wasn't adjusted, I don't think anybody, any layman, any headmistress, any whatever headmaster, whatever school administrator can say confidently that any school feeding provider, whatever, all those I don't think any of them can say that they do not have arrears which has not been paid. And I hope that we can pay, use the 858 to pay. Remember, the president said pensions were owing, right? He said it at the May Day. I can list contractors said they are owed. You remember I was in this studio and saying that offsets were taking place, not payments and all that. So all of this, if you add it, there's 858 or something, represent all the arrears in the system. In particular, you're asking for, for which you can argue that maybe the extra levies, but it take time for the additional extra levies to come in to pay. But if it's going to come in as revenue, it's going to come in as tax revenue, which is going to pay arrears. So you should show the arrears in the supplementary.
This is not the first time you are raising issues with the kind of things that are even reported in the budget. You said you try to be as detailed as possible about inflows from all sectors. How much in terms of arrears that you're going to pay?
And this is the figures which we were just, the ESLA figures. The average is about 3. It started with 3.2 billion. In fact, under the program, for the period to 2018, from 2016, ESLA was supposed to bring in 10.3 billion. ESLA brought in 9.6 billion. Almost 10 billion, or almost the 10 billion was brought.
Okay.
Right? If we owe 13 billion,
we should be able to pay that off.
It will be left with 3 billion, which next year's projection shows can be used to pay off, because next year is projected to increase to 3.5 billion. Right? Now the government's own projection is that up to 2025 or something which they projected, ESLA is even going to go up to about 5 billion per annum. And so my conservative calculation is that during that period, about 29 billion, close to 30 billion will come in. Not even up to the 10 years. So this is the point.
So a couple of things. As we speak now, we should have made significant effort in paying off the energy sector debts.
I can say with certainty that
it would have
our
been paid.
part would have been paid.
It would have been paid if you were a minister.
I can say that confidently. Because remember, we had a progressive fee free. I still believe is the... we didn't... The impression should not be given that we didn't have an alternative. We had an alternative. We were building the East Coast.
We'll come back to that.
Yes.
We'll take a...
But I'm saying,
Yes, we will take a short break. We'll come back. We'll deal with some of those issues having to do with the free senior high school, among other issues that have come up recently. Because as finance minister, he was watching a lot. And one of the issues I'll be raising with you is the issue of... this issue of the PDS and MIDA and the arrangement that is currently ongoing, because your understanding of what was supposed to happen and what is happening now, your understanding of the information that's available so far. So we'll be talking about that one too. So we are talking with Honorable Seth Tekpe. We'll be back shortly.
Baby, come back to me. Kai utrumu se min wa ye bi pen. Oh, schoolboy, come back to me. Come back to me. Darling, come back to me. Kai wuchiri musa in waye bibe. Oh, schoolgirl, come back to me. Come back to me. Baby, come back to me. Kai wuchiri musa in waye bibe. Oh, schoolboy, come back to me. Come back to me. Darling, come back to me. Kai wuchiri musa in waye bibe. Oh, schoolgirl, come back to me. Kai wuchiri musa in waye bibe. Bonsa say, aminu na sabomu, ezoba say, aminu na sabomu, rombota say, nodo miniwa, shube uwa say, nodo miniwa nti. Oh, schoolboy, come back to me. Esi kai wuchiri musa in waye bibe. Bonsa say, aminu na sabomu, ezoba say, aminu na sabomu, rombota say, nodo miniwa, shube uwa say, nodo miniwa. Oh, schoolgirl, come back to me. Come back to me. Baby, come back to me. Kai wuchiri musa in waye bibe. Oh, schoolboy, come back to me. Come back to me. Darling, come back to me. Kai wuchiri musa in waye bibe. Oh, schoolgirl, come back to me.
It's only 38 minutes past 8 here in the studios of Radio Gold 90.5. We are live on our online streaming apps. We're also live on Facebook, Radio Gold 905 FM. So do share your thoughts with us. It's very important. We want to know what you think about the conversation we are having. Because so the WhatsApp number is 0233-995-905. If you're watching through Facebook, please do share a comment with us. And if there are any questions you'd like to ask the former finance minister about the work they did, and then also about some of the issues that are happening currently, please do share with us. A couple of you are talking about the press conference. I'll put all that to him. But in the meantime, the conversation has centered, a lot of the conversation we have been having has centered on ESLA because of the fact that ESLA has become the major tool through which a lot of things are being done. And I have been wondering, the bonds that were issued using ESLA, based on what you knew about the energy sector levies, and this is my last question on ESLA, hopefully, because I'm hoping that it doesn't come up again.
Yes, okay.
Yes. So those bonds, shouldn't they have been used to pay off? Were they not enough to pay off the debts then?
I don't think they got all the money initially, but some monies, are coming in, and I know that the ESLA report is a bit dated now. There could be, maybe the updates. We are going to analyze them, and maybe we can have a session on, but to date, from the strength of the flows, actually the portion for the energy sector, which comes in about 1.2,
Okay.
and then I'm combining that with the road levy, considering that contractors also owe banks and others. I'm saying that if you combine the two, then you could have used it. That's about 2.5. You could have used it to, to tackle headlong, the banking sector crisis through the approach that we had started. Yes.
But
the bonds ultimately should bring in enough money You know, remember it's 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I believe strongly that, you know, even if you raise a 7-year with more money, that should be enough, you know, to cover it. And then the banks, when they do a turnaround, then the question is if, you know, should even pay some of that back, you know, to government.
Well, one of the things I talked about was, I've been talking about was when you said, you were just talking about Free Senior High School, when you said, okay, you've looked at what they are doing and you don't think it is sustainable. Almost everybody went. Even people in your party were wondering what you were talking about. And
I remember
Yes.
one Alaji program.
yes, people took you on, people took you on seriously or raising questions about why you were saying what you were saying. Now, you earlier tried to explain why you thought that the situation was not going to be sustainable. Take us through that again. What did you see? What were you seeing at the time?
Look, we came to power from Professor Mills with one big albatross. Yeah, let me withdraw that, because when I say that, people look at it as if I'm anti-worker, which I'm not, because Labour did a lot to work with us. Then I mean that Labour at the highest level, and through their delegates and whatever at who, to find a path to resolving, you know what I'm talking about, single spine. Single spine, you know, the migration was quite expensive. And the last single spine arrears, apart from the few institutions that were left to be migrated, even back then, I think it was around 2015. That's how long it took. It took the Mills and Mahama administration. Now, the cost of the overruns were mainly, it increased wages.
Okay.
But the bulk was the back pay, you know, because you were migrating the entire civil service. They were doing it in batches. So it means from when the first payments were made, I believe, to the police, everybody was entitled to single
Arrears.
spine.
Yes.
Arrears.
Yeah.
And so if that was, I believe that was 2010, or because we suspended the implementation for about a year under Dr. Dufort to try and understand, you know, what this whole policy was, because what was left, what was handed over was not sufficient to give us the liability.
Okay.
And it took, I was a deputy there, it took up to my time to even get it, you know, to get a fair estimate. At one point, we came out with a number that said that all the arrears would be 70%.
So you didn't get a
Of tax
picture,
revenue.
a clear picture of how much single spine was going to cost until you became finance minister. That was when the picture was a bit clearer.
We got some picture, but then there were issues. You see, you are also dealing with grading, you are dealing with others. And so until the institutions under Mr. Graham, who was the head of the institution for...
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it has also escaped.
Excuse me, yes.
Fair Wages and Salaries Commission.
Until they came out and sorted out the grading and others, you could not compute the liability. So we set up a task force, instead of doing it institution by institution, to do, and he was, I think, either he was very instrumental in it, together with the controller.
Okay.
And some staff from all the institutions, Ministry of Finance, Bank, and, you know, and wage experts. We even brought in some old wage experts. Mr. Amamu, who is very knowledgeable. And we computed it. And that's why we said, hey, we are going to use almost 70% to pay, you know, of tax revenue. Yeah. Now, the point I'm making is, if for single spine, which affects public service employers, civil service employers only, because remember, SOEs, they have their own, and the agencies, and most of the arrears were one time. You know, you pay arrears and it's off. And it brought the nation such fiscal stress. Then look at the number of secondary schools involved, right? And look at the fact that when I made that statement, I said, we are making a lifetime commitment, unlike single spine. It's not one-off. right? And you are going to need resources annually. My point was not in opposition to free SHS because I had defended the progressively fee-free on those grounds.
Okay.
That it would be best to take the schools. And that is what happens in advanced countries everywhere. Again, it's my exposure that makes me, I had opportunity, my kids grew up, my kid was close to his high school. The first one, he joined the bus. The second one, there's a distance. If you have to bike to school or walk to school, depending on the distance, to the school. And then those they take buses. That's why you have the yellow buses, all over the U.S. Because they take them to community schools, particularly senior high schools. And until you have that infrastructure in place, because remember, tuition is already free.
Okay.
Right? School uniforms were provided at primary level and other. Boarding was not free. And it's one of the big elements.
Okay.
And some fees were not free. So a large chunk of is already in the budget.
Okay.
So if you did a progressively thing, you would achieve the same results. Because by the time you take the schools, now for those who, it doesn't mean everybody should stick to his, rural school or his urban school only. I may be close to Achimota, but if my favorite is to go to Augustine's or to go to somewhere, and that's my first choice, right? And I go there. Then for those who introduce bursaries, which, Echi, Mama has mentioned, and other things too, for those exceptional cases, right? And once the school is free and accessible, we're doing the feelings, so like West Africa Secondary with a large compound, you can do a B stream or other things. So those were but I'm saying the big bang was unsustainable. Right. The reason I said when you say something is unsustainable, it isn't that you cannot comb through the budget. It isn't that you cannot go and borrow, to meet it and whatever. But whether, the capping that you are doing and depriving rural education is something which you want, perpetually, to go along. Whether the oil revenue for infrastructure development, which is going to recurring, would also be perpetual.
Okay.
Right. So this is the context. It didn't mean opposition. No, we had a progressive fee-free, and the rush to do infrastructure now, even by the current government, bears testimony to what we are saying. Right. That our approach to building the infrastructure and whatever, which will progressively put in. If all the infrastructure had been finished, you can, imagine the number of students who would have to, walk to schools and to here. Because remember, for communities that don't have, day schools,
Okay.
they are not necessarily, they are not necessarily going to early schools. They are going to the next districts. They are going to, to attend school, which still has some hardship.
Okay.
And that's where the sleeping on verandas and things, are coming up, out from. But if every district could have theirs, 2 or 3, then it will be at least in some close proximity with a busing program. And that's is more feasible.
So that was where you were getting to.
Yes.
With the progressive.
Yeah, that's what progressively means.
So you're also looking at making it
like everything. It takes account of the, like the being pragmatic. Yeah, just as we spoke about. The cost is just as we spoke about a short while ago. About the big bang approach to the bank resolution. There's a heavy cost to it, which is unemployment, credit squeeze, confidence, and all that. And that's why you talk about, again, to be taking opportunity cost.
Okay.
In economics.
Well, the president has said that they are sticking with that approach. They believe that that's the best thing to do. They said they are investing in the future.
There's progressive fee-free not to invest in the future of the kid.
That is his option. But
Yes.
what is he risking?
I think we just more borrowing. Right. More borrowing. More capping, which won't go away. Increase in ESLA. increase in ESLA may not go to free SHS, but maybe because some regular funds that should go to the energy sector
are not coming.
Or
are being pushed to.
Exactly. To those priorities.
And
the energy sector is biting because you have, the PRG and the IPP and under all those, And by the way, we started the PCOA to try and change I think that's another subject, PDS. You said we'll talk about it. So there's a cost.
So when you pick...
Because remember, it's been strenuously denied, but there's enough evidence to make it impossible to deny. They said we're not going to borrow.
Okay.
The nuisance taxes will go away. They didn't say they would say they will keep them, let alone increase them. Even the VAT peripheral, because remember, the mechanism of VAT is such that if you exempt a sector like airline transport and which we brought in, if you exempt them, the VAT on the inputs, the VAT they paid on the inputs sticks and it still costs. So it's just a 2.5% or so, average which they are adding because they are not going to get a refund.
Okay.
And our approach, they are going to get a refund for all of that. Which is to bring them, the non-core financial services and others. Right. And I'm saying that the fiscal pressure is so, heavy now that, they've made it even more efficient. AGI just issued, a statement saying they should pay them back the input tax credits.
Okay.
And they should bring back the NHIL and the GET Fund and others for which they were getting credit. Because the economy is also such that they cannot increase prices and they are suffering. So it's AGI speaking now, not Seth Tekpe.
Now, if when you pick the budgets that have been read so far, can you see from all the budget if you put together, can you see a clear picture on exactly the impacts the free senior high school policy is having on the economy, without necessarily having to infer?
Well, you have to do some inference. There's a direct capping, which I think Honorable Forson was sent me yesterday, and I'm going to, look at it. Some 1 billion or so is capped, every year, and 1 billion in terms of rural development, in terms of health insurance, in terms of, education. GET Fund is, already into education. But why is even GET Fund being capped? Why is GET Fund being mortgaged? Remember they took a loan, I believe by now, yes, against the, why not? We were using GET Fund annually to complement the expenditures and also a portion of it into infrastructure. So why the rush? Why the rush to even, mortgage royalties, which is in the budget? So those are some of the direct flows that are going into, let me say, the priorities, including the high priorities, including free SHS.
Free SHS.
Yes. The more indirect one is clear. They borrowed more than we did, and strenuously, as I said, they are increasing taxes now. Right? I was supposed to, myself and my boss were the ones who were imposing taxes on, and apart from explicitly, increasing taxes, you go and increase even fees like DVLA, luxury. We already had a luxury tax. We have vehicles coming at a higher import duty. They pay a higher excise duty, right? And by the way, if my vehicle is, a cylinder or whatever, and it guzzles fuel, for a distance, which a car with 1.5 can cover 5. Let's say 50 kilometers, I do just 15 kilometers. It means I'm buying more fuel.
Yes.
And the more fuel I buy, even you pay more ESLA.
Okay.
If it's fuel based, you pay more excise, So
you are being taxed on different fronts.
So I'm saying there was already a tax structure, a tax mechanism to apply to those luxury taxes. It's part of the pressure. Again, it's a pressure, which is now leading to an increase in ESLA. More explicitly and then indirectly blocking input taxes. So those are the signs that there's a fiscal. And don't forget that there's a cost of the financial sector restructuring, which is also falling on the budget. Yes, so the budget is under. Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen pictures of community day senior high schools that were constructed under the administration you served in, that have been abandoned, have been overtaken by bushes, and it doesn't look like the government is interested in using them. Now, what comes to your mind when you see such things, abandoned projects that you started and worked on, that are not being touched at all?
Well, it's a waste of public resources, right? It's a waste of public resources. Secondly, I'm not the one to say it. I think some of those videos, you see people in the communities, including the district hospitals and the rest, and saying, come and finish it for us, because, it will save, our pregnant mothers, it will save, So I think the communities are speaking for us. The communities are saying, come and finish the school. My child doesn't have to go to another town, doesn't have to leave, it's close by, they will attend school. Yeah. So I think the communities are speaking.
How many of the free senior high schools do you recall, the community day senior high school, do you recall were completed?
My recollection is, I can't remember, but my recollection is that we were capping it at 120.
Okay.
When crude oil and other prices fell. Okay. Instead of 200, and then go back. By now that the recovery has occurred, maybe we would have at least, completed the 200.
If the administration was in power by now, you would have gotten to at least, if not complete the 120, you would have added the remainder 80 to
Definitely. And you can imagine what 80 would do for our phasing out. I don't think the students would. Many of them would be going to their schools, so there will be bus closer to the schools. Yeah, so that is the picture which would have emerged.
The president has said recently that you did not pay for those schools. Is that accurate?
You don't pay for everything, and again, it shows. For me, with all due respect to the president, I think he's, technical people sometimes have to, right? There is. When the year ends, right, it doesn't mean that everything comes to a standstill.
Okay.
We also took on, projects. The biggest example was Buida. We had to continue, take an extra loan to complete it. And that's major.
Okay.
Right. But if you talk about projects, and outstanding, talk about ESLA, which we left to settle, for example, the contractors. Okay. The money is flowing. Why have the contractors not been paid? If you take credit for, let's say, the Kosomo Rail, right? Or you take credit, for the Eastern University, then it bears also saying that it's the Mahama administration that left the loan. Okay. For its completion. Okay. And again, with all due respect, we left, we were moving to accrual accounting. They called it arrears. Fair enough. The 7 billion, and they offset 5 billion. Okay. The president should be giving the true picture that they never paid that 5 billion out of the 7 billion. It was offset. So what they carried forward was only 2 billion. If he was giving the impression that they paid, they had to pay the 7 billion. I challenge him. The offset was there in the 2017 budget. And if you go to the 2018 and 2019 budget, you won't see the 500 carry forward the way we carry single spine, which was, a program we took with arrears and programmed it and told the whole of Ghana that this is what we are going to pay, annually. So to every negative, there is a positive. So the loans we left, the tax mechanisms, nuisance taxes we left, which were to be abolished, but have been retained. Let's quantify those also. And then we can see exactly and see whether they would have been, even if you took 5 billion, right, or 7 billion, let me say 7 billion, right, of amount owed to contractors. The enhanced road levy is bringing 1.2 billion annually. So by now you would have
paid them off.
Well, if you haven't paid them off, like we did with VR and the rest, you could do an effective, borrowing policy that would, you would have got a loan to pay them. And I think we did part of that, and then I pay them off, and I use the ESLA, enhanced road levy to pay, the loan. So we had a program for all of this, right? And I think the president, again, with all due respect, should tell Ghanaians that the Mahama administration left 200 million, in a sinking fund, which...
Explain that concept to us, the sinking fund. What was it supposed to do?
Let me just use an expression that I've always been using. As a nation, the nations that borrow to do infrastructure and continue to borrow to do infrastructure, right, without interest rates going up or defaulting on their loans are the ones who also lend to pay the loan. Okay. And I gave you, or the audience, an example. Let me repeat it. The best example is a sovereign bond, the first sovereign bond that Ghana issued in 2000. We were paying only interest. The amount was 750 million. So every year, the interest is calculated on the 750 million, and we pay the interest. And then we roll over, because the terms of the bond said that you can roll over. You don't have to pay the principal. So anybody buying it knows that you are not going to pay the principal, right? So what they want is the interest. And if you are not going to pay down the principal, they will be getting their interest. And if you ask them to refinance, they will refinance. Because it's like paying me and then going to the bond market to buy another bond. So it doesn't make any difference. You get a picture. Right. But it's not good for us. And we're doing treasury bills the same way. You issue treasury bills, you pay only interest. That's why treasury bills were becoming huge and huge and huge. And we say it was crowding out, because then you have to refinance. So if the 90 days come for the treasury bill and you don't pay the principal, you have to look for new money to refinance it, and then another 90 days. But by the way, by the time you are refinancing and taking the old one, you are taking a new one to support the budget. Okay. So you just keep. So if you are not paying principal, as we do with standard loans, your debt level will just keep rising. So sinking fund was sitting back and saying, let's use part of the oil revenue to start paying. We don't have a dedicated source in the budget, right? We don't have a dedicated source in the budget for paying down loans for which we know we can pay only interest, but the principal will catch up with us. So the scenario I'm painting is, if to use that example, if you were paying from 2007 up to 2013, 2014, we were paying only principal. But the bond will mature October 4th, 2017. So you have 2015, 16, 17, 3 years to go. And you have to look for 750 million. Or you restructure. Crude oil prices had gone down, or was beginning to go down. Where are you going to get the money? So you have to refinance. Your debt levels are already high. Okay. The one holding the bond for which you want to refinance knows that your debt levels are high, and you would have to pay a higher interest rate. Right. So we started, taking it off. And as I showed you, we started reducing the rate at which we were borrowing. So sinking fund simply says, let us put aside some of the oil revenue, right, which is new to the budget, to tackle the problem of debt. Because debt was becoming a bigger issue, right? If you are not paying down your debt, then you can't take on new loans for new projects. You only be paying, interest on the old one and refinancing the material. So we put in place the sinking fund, which we were then using to pay off, some of the our existing debt. Okay. And as I said, I explained already, so let me not repeat it. We managed to set aside $550 million US, including 200 million with the NPP used to take off that bond. Okay. But the sad thing is that we stopped that program. So the question is, where is the money going?
So you mean no money is being paid into?
No, the sinking fund has since accumulated about 800 million, but no bonds. No, the monies are going in because the law hasn't been changed. We went to Parliament to put, the sinking fund is we cap the stabilization fund, and then the excess flow is what we put into the sinking fund, the contingency fund. And both the sinking fund and contingency fund are no longer being populated. The infrastructure fund, which also benefits from oil revenue, is also not being populated.
Okay.
Right.
If you say not being populated, you mean the monies are not going in there, or they are not being
In the
used
case
for
of
the purpose?
in the case of the gift, the money is not going in. Contingency fund, money is not going. In the case of the sinking fund, the money is going in, but it's not being used to redeem debt.
For the purposes for which?
Redeeming debt, yes.
Oh, okay.
But we are adding to that. Remember, we have issued, more bonds.
The issue of the Ghana Infrastructure Fund, they have come up once again in this whole BDS matter. But the intention, you said, was so you can be able to generate money that will be used for development.
Again, the capital budget was being squeezed. And that's what happens when you put a lot of your money in the budget, right, into consumption, right, which is when we say consumption or recurrence part of the budget.
Okay.
Then the recurrence is wages, interest payments, goods and services, right. And we say they are recurring because when you pay them, one, yes, if you pay me as a father, I take the money home, but most of my salary goes into consumption.
Okay.
Food. I may put a percentage down to pay mortgage, to pay for a car, or to do, so and it's the same. It's a capital budget that invests. And it's a capital budget after you have invested that create jobs.
Okay.
Creation of jobs is not just about the 500,000 in the civil service and shooting it up to 700,000, even if they come and sit down and they are not doing anything.
Okay.
It's important for the person who hasn't got employment, but we need more sustainable. And that's why we started expanding infrastructure. And the countries, especially the middle-income countries that have done it well, even the advanced countries, I'll come back to it, the middle-income countries that have done it well in recent years have set up what we call the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Okay.
Incidentally, Brazil, Middle East, Dubai, and the rest is from oil.
Okay.
So that's the exposure I was talking about. So we said, let's also put part of the oil revenue into the infrastructure fund. Now, if you have a law that says, and you are abiding by the law, that's the thing, you must abide by the law. And the market should see visibly that you are doing what you say you will do. Right? So if every year oil revenue I put 100 million into the infrastructure fund, I have two options. I can use the 100 million to start building, let's say, Airport Terminal 3, because it's exclusively for capital projects.
Okay.
And preferentially, it should be for capital projects that can pay, commercial projects.
Okay.
So that you can rebuild the fund. Then the other government money will go into social infrastructure, the budget money and the rest, ABF. Now, so either I put in 100 million, and if the project is going to cost 250 million, 300 million, capital projects are very big, or even 600 million, like, the Buida, it means that it will take me 6 years before I can finish Buida. On the other hand, you can tell, the lender that, hey, look, I have 600 million from my oil revenues, which I've put aside every year, right? So can you give me the 600 million up front? And I would put the 100 million coming from infrastructure fund into an escrow account to be paying for the loan. You get the 600 million and complete it. But remember, if you run that commercial project very well, and that's the principle on which sovereign wealth funds are, if you run it very well, the oil revenue is going to pay 600 million, but the project is going to be completed faster, let's say in 2 years, instead of 6 years. And for 4 years, the project will start paying back. So you are no longer going to retrieve only 400 million from the oil revenue to pay, but you have some money coming in.
Okay.
And the next time you can use the money from the existing project and from your oil revenue to tackle two projects, no one. And so the more you have commercial projects that are bringing in money, and like we now have 3 oil fields, it means that the infrastructure fund is also growing, and then the projects are also growing. So NPS, for example, and the Kumasi Market and the Airport Terminal 3, which were our flagship self-financing, we call it self-financing projects, would have brought in the money.
Okay.
And this is not new. Akosomo Dam, that's the basis on which Kwame Nkrumah and others and William have set up there. And it works.
Okay.
If it's worked for Dubai, there's no reason why it shouldn't work for us. But we put these things in place as new oil revenue because you can do that because the oil revenue is new. It doesn't mean you don't have other needs, you do. But you are only beefing up your capital budget in a better way, with a resource, that can help you do infrastructure. And when you do sustainable infrastructure, that's when you create jobs.
Okay.
Because you employ, you give a contract to a contractor who employs a civil engineer, electrical engineer, maybe a road expert. They employ administrators, they employ workers, administrators, accountants, and all that, right? So the money you pay them creates, they also pay somebody and it multiplies, and that's how you create more jobs. And so if you have that mechanism to do infrastructure, then. And the story I wanted to say, I was reading, I was talking to the current head of Fiscal Affairs Department at the IMF, and I was telling him what we were trying to do with the oil revenue. He said, wait a minute, he was the finance minister for, I believe, Portugal before he went to the fund.
Yeah.
And he said, my first major research paper I did was on sinking fund and infrastructure fund. And it was by the U.S., and back then, before the U.S. could get natural resources and things and came together, all the states to form the United States of America, guess where they got the money? Profit that was being made by the post office was put aside to support borrowing to start the infrastructure.
Profit from the post office?
Yes, because then they had introduced the post office as a national monopoly for mails like UK and others. And so it was quite profitable back then because you didn't have Korea and DHL and others.
And there was not even the Android phones and everything. So.
Yes. And it's Hamilton, the first credited to have set up an effective treasury for the US. Yeah, he put that scheme in place.
But they have abandoned that particular plan. There's also...
Well, I hear they may be going back.
They will go to the Ghana Infrastructure Fund.
I hear they may be putting some money. But Fortune will smile and will bring it back and show that. Because we've been able to use it, invested in... it was to invest in Airport City 2. In fact, the land for Airport City 2, the portion coming towards DVLA, which was going to be used to, to build a very modern facility linked to Terminal 3 with hotels and whatever, that land, instead of going to individuals, was vested in infrastructure fund. And what that means is that infrastructure fund would have a sustainable lease.
Okay.
And then when the project's financing, I think it was 15 years after the financing was recovered, infrastructure fund would own the facility.
Okay.
That's what Dubai Fund.
I'll be coming to the issues that are being raised by my viewers in a bit, but let me raise this. There's this issue of the Wa Regional Hospital, the Upper West Regional Hospital. Was recently commissioned.
The Eurojet.
Yes.
Yeah.
The suggestion by the president.
The financing structure. Let me just be straightforward. The financing structure was, wasn't, very effective, and you had to change it. And a lot of the sources from which the money was going to come did not come, and all that. So we had to. That's why it took time.
So the funds didn't come from the original source?
No.
So were the funds
we had to provide more backing. The state had to give letters of credit to others to bring it, where previously they were.
And all those were done under you?
No. Yes. It started actually with Dr. Dufo.
Okay, Dr. Dufo started it.
Yes.
And it was complete. Because
Dr. Dufo, some of the letters of credits were signed by myself, the other by Honorable Fifi Kuti.
Okay.
Who was then my colleague deputy minister.
Okay.
Right. And because we had to substitute, because they couldn't raise the money, it was virtually issuing like a guarantee they were going to. So the original sources didn't bring the money. So the credit goes to, which was eventually done, I think, between the Mills and the
Mahamad.
administrations. Yes.
Then there's the small issue of PDS.
But we are back to the same thing. We didn't pay for a project. We didn't start a project, but the source of financing.
That was the issue.
Yeah, that's so important.
That's the,
so the credit
that's the Ghana.
yeah, so the credit should also go. It's just at the Eastern University, the source of financing.
Okay.
And by the way, the second loan for that university has been taken, we should have completed the project, in so many has been taken, to be done in Bonso.
Okay.
With all, I believe that another funding could have been raised easily to do that.
Then there's the issue of the PDS matter, which has come up because of the Compact 2. At this point in time, after listening to everything that has transpired, there's a proposal that perhaps we should just do away with the Compact 2 altogether. Is that option available?
Well, the Compact 2, if people say we should do away with it, let's remember,
especially the part that has to do with the ECG and the PSP.
But then it is linked to the PSP. But remember, much of the financing actually to restructure the sector is what is coming from the compacts.
Okay.
It's the 500 million, in its aid. So I think we should try and, take some of the emotion, out. The point is that the element of the Compact 2 that was messed up was the ownership of the PDS. And let's tackle that.
And what do you make of the whole scandal that is brewing?
Well, I always say that even up to now, you don't have all the facts, and so for some of us who what we say is on authority, you have to be, careful. But there's enough information now to show, the changes that were occurring, or had been orchestrated to occur in terms of the ownership, the capacity to bring in, the money, to equip and all those things. And I think those are the things that need to be sorted out. Whether, and there's an investigation that we and some of us we are all waiting to see it. Whether professionally it was right to have changed the condition precedent to condition subsequent, and all that, yes.
Now, concluding the interview, let me just be reading some of the things that my listeners are saying. I told you about the press conference bit. It's captured by Patrick Aaron, who says, "Good morning to Radio Gold, the power station. Kudos to Comrade Seth Tekpe, but I suggest that the former finance minister holds a press conference to clarify issues as regard the current economic woes." Is this something that you're thinking about?
We have a flag bearer. And I think that we should. I think it's coming out with a program, and
so leadership.
And I think so I think leadership. We are going to finish with our primaries. We will know our candidates and whatever. And I believe that once that has been done, the agenda, remember the party itself had to come together and all that. It doesn't mean that, so we do programs like this, but I believe that there will be a cohesive, because, yes, I can talk about the big picture, our initiatives from Exim Bank to Infrastructure Fund, Seeking Fund, and explain all of them and how other countries use it. We are not reinventing the wheel, but I would need, say, my deputy at power, Engineer Paul, so that I give credit to your deputies, has a lot of insight, because I was just a supervising minister. He had worked, in the ministry from Dr. T. Ajay's, so if he's anchoring you in going to be a media brief, it will be, very effective in filling some of the details. My colleague Honorable Boa, because energy, is key. And then when it comes to education,
but you admit that
when it comes to free SHS, and who best than Nana and others,
But you admit that at some point in time you would have to speak about some of these
we
issues.
have to tell our story. Yes.
Yeah.
We are doing it through media like this. I go another. Yes.
There's a comment that's coming from Raymond Bachman. He says that greetings, or Mr. Tekpe is too decent for Ghanaian and African policy. Do you think that people have always felt that your approach is not suited to the Ghanaian political terrain, that you try to, as much as possible, avoid unnecessary confrontations, and then you stick to the facts to which like you said, you talk a bit more technically? Have people complained about that? And I've heard people raise issues.
Well, I've heard that. I've heard that sentiment, a lot. But I also believe that, there are people who want, the facts to judge, not just for themselves. They may be opinion leaders, they may be other. You remember, there are very knowledgeable people in the field of, say, finance, who may agree or disagree with what I'm saying. But at least they will know that this is the policy we had. Whether the big bang, and then they would also have been read, and they would then begin to compare and whatever, and they vote, right? And so, I don't know what he means. Well, I think I don't understand what he says, but I debated in Parliament. I do, and I still believe that, I have the opportunity of working in fiscal for a very long time. I've had the opportunity of working outside, have the exposure. I still do some consulting, and I see a lot, outside. And sometimes when you go on the attack too much, then you divert from the facts.
Okay.
And it makes it easier for your opponents to just, go after your personality or go after something you said and completely divert attention instead of sticking to the. If I say I left a second term sheet, it's a fact. You can want to deny it or not. Right. If I say that you refinance, the first bond that we did, and I don't believe that the terms on which you refinance it are better than mine, it's in the national report.
Okay.
Right. Yes.
Habib Bantu says, Honorable Seth.
But by the way, the other, they say that our Professor Mears, right?
Habib Bantu says, Honorable Seth Tekpe, petroleum products have been increased, electricity and water bills high, talk tax high. In the face of all this hardship, how and what is your response? How could you have handled this problem? Will you reduce the price of petroleum products? What about light and water? What would the great NDC do? I think we talked about the alternatives.
We had alternatives. We had alternatives under ESLA, right? There's a portion which was meant, and is being used now for subsidy. What we did was we took the U.S., South Africa, and other approaches, and we paid that money to TOR and to BOSS. And the state has started a strategic stock.
Okay.
And that's why, two things. We were the ones who stopped petrol-queues.
Okay.
We were the ones who stopped petrol-queues with those policies. And remember the second point, between 2015 and 2016, there wasn't a significant increase in crude oil in pump prices.
Okay.
Why? Because we have started, like those countries do, when prices, you buy low, at a low price, you fill the tanks, and when prices start going up, then you release it.
Okay.
And when you release it to gold and to others, they make a profit.
Okay.
Right? And they reinvest. And in fact, one of the programs for the infrastructure fund, which we call the low-hanging fruit, to which Mr. Hoy was chairman and others had signed off, was that infrastructure fund was going to use the oil revenues they were getting to build more fuel tanks.
Okay.
Because if you build more fuel tanks beyond their capacity, you can, after all, we, sell, fuel to, landlords. So we had a strategy.
Okay.
The point is, I think now we will be this, so NDC had a strategy.
Okay.
And it achieved the results which I'm talking about. And we're able to liberalize. That's how come the contest, one of the instruments we use to liberalize. And then we're going to do hedging to make sure that And so if crude oil prices are rising, and they rose during our era, and we went through it, we couldn't pay subsidies and the rest. And so you had to find a solution. And this was a solution. And I'm saying that it proved it worked. Or it started working.
Okay, so Angelo Kojefiagbe says, is asking, Sena, ask the minister what different things are they bringing on board to alleviate the suffering of the Ghanaian people. That was the issue we were talking about with the flag bearer and the alternative. Yes. So when should we be expecting the NDC to at least to start telling us? So what would you do if you when you take over? If you do take over,
we have a leadership and a management. And we are working, there are some talks which have been approved. For example, public forum, I think one is coming on next week, approved by headquarters, to which some of us are going to participate. We are waiting for the party agenda and but in the meantime, nobody is restricting me from, say, coming here and talking.
And
I go to staff, I go to other places, and they ask issues, and we contribute. You know, the finance committee of Parliament, led by my former deputy, who is now the ranking, have also been playing their part, and other committees. Yes. So I think we've been active. I'll urge our listeners to listen more to some of those things. They are coordinated so that they can use it to do the education. But the time will come for the open discourse. Yeah.
Well, those are the issues that have been raised. Majority of it relates to the press conference bit and all of that. Well,
and to the fact that I don't fight.
Yes. Honorable Seth Tekpe says that even in this particular situation, he's limited in a way by the fact that there's a leadership, and if he's speaking on behalf of the party, he has to be endorsed by that leadership. But he still grants interviews to explain some of those issues. And we are grateful for your time today. It's been an extensive one. Thank you.
Yes, I'm grateful, and I hope that you had a lot of people listening.
Yes.
This approach, I wish you well in it to continue. I think technology makes it difficult to shut people out business.
Yeah, and having you pass through alone is a big boost to what we are doing here. You know, people make news, and you are a huge person, so. Well, thank you. It's
You're most welcome.
Yeah,
It's always enjoyable, being with you guys.
Okay. Honorable.